Today we'll be talking about Drake Bell and why he's a weirdo. I'm Rugburn.
And I'm Pickled Landon.
And this is Tombstone Tourist. So today we're going to be talking about a pretty big name, at least at the time of us growing up. You know, us early 2000s babies, us 90s babies. I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with a show called Drake and Josh. We're going to be talking about Drake Bell specifically, just how he ultimately groomed and took advantage of an underage girl. Someone who looked up to him as a fan, idolized him, kind of put him on a platform. This 12-year-old girl talked to her aunt. Her aunt was like, oh, hey, you like Drake and Josh? I kind of like know Drake. And so she introduced the two of them. From there, things just progressively get weirder and weirder as time goes on.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, she started off as like a huge fan. It's understandable. She's a young girl. The show's aimed at younger children. She finds out that the aunt has a mutual friend and she gets the opportunity to meet him. And this first meeting starts off a series of text chains and meetups, you know, and it starts off supposedly innocent, but right around the time she's like 14 or 15, the nature of the text exchanges starts to change.
He starts to sexualize her a bit and be like, you look grown, like kind of like that weirdo creep line, like you're really mature for your age, like kind of vibe is to what starts to take place after that. And it keeps progressing and getting weirder and weirder from that point.
Yeah. And at a certain point, the text message starts to take a sexual charge to them and they begin sending like pictures and stuff to each other. We got to keep in mind this man's approaching 30 or in his 30s, and this girl is 12 to 14 years old, you know, during this 2-year interaction where they're getting to know each other. I'm going to say that in quotation marks. Say what you will, but I think that the aunt has a major role to play in this. But the aunt takes her to a concert on December 1st, 2017, and she meets up with Drake again. And at this point, she states that she performs oral sex on him. And then the next day, the aunt again takes her to Drake's hotel room where she states again that she performed oral sex on him again while the aunt waited in the hallway.
Unfortunately, Drake was not charged for those exact incidents. Otherwise, his charges would be noticeably worse.
No, yeah, these were allegations. These are the statements that the victim made.
Correct. Unfortunately, by the time that she comes forth to authorities and is ready to talk about this, there's no DNA or not enough to hold up to actually hold weight to that. So those exact things he didn't have to necessarily answer for, which is unfortunate. And I would also like to note, if you are a victim of sexual assault, you should immediately, as bad or as embarrassing as it may be, you should go to authorities and kind of try to get things pushing forward so that way whoever did the heinous act on you can go ahead and see repercussions. I understand she was very young, she was a child. Something like that is traumatizing and really hard to kind of get out. And not only that, I think he manipulated her to think that they were more than that and he wasn't like using her or like molesting her in a way because she idolized him. She probably thought like we're boyfriend and girlfriend. This is deeper than that, but he's just grooming.
I'm glad you brought that up because a situation like that is actually what led to her going to the authorities. Drake has a fiance at the time that discovers the messages and she starts communicating with the victim.
Allegedly. That wasn't proven.
Allegedly starts communicating with the victim through the phone and this puts a bad vibe in the air. And she threatens to expose him in like 2018. If she had just come forward at the beginning, if she could have seen through the grooming and everything like that, they could have done kits, they could have gotten therapy, they could have done all these different things to kind of help her in the moment. I don't know if the fiance made that clear to her, but I think that she didn't really have like a real world awakening until that moment happened to her where she can kind of like see the picture for what it really was, that she was being manipulated and used.
If the victim's statements on that happening were true, I don't know exactly what the fiance was thinking, whether she was trying to protect Drake or whether she was trying to figure the situation out and discussed it, or I kind of am led to believe that she wouldn't be a fan of that happening. Now, I don't know, because obviously I don't know what type of person his fiance was.
Well, they did end up getting married.
I mean, I don't know. She could have been protecting him or she could have been in on it. It's really hard to say in Hollywood, especially childhood stars. They're all known to be rather traumatized with weird things that happened to them growing up, which could lead to things like this. I mean, there's plenty of instances in Hollywood where things like that happen, where they might have been abused growing up, and so they unfortunately end up just creating this chain where they become the abuser, and, you know.
While it doesn't excuse it, it does shed light on the point that there's generally nobody there for these children to point out the truth. They are being manipulated, and even their parents aren't there. You know, the aunt was complicit, in my opinion. Like I said, this is just my opinion.
I mean, think about that. She's in the hallway dropping a 14-year-old girl off into a hotel room. And the reason we wanted to bring this case up too is because instances like that, like him not being charged for that and the sexual assault portion of it, I feel like he deserves to be exposed. You can't just let this slide. Like, if you're touching kids and being weird to kids, you need to answer for it, whether it's your credibility, your career. Something has to give. You can't just sit there and get away with like hurting children like that.
There's not a lot publicly stated about what happened. You have to actually dig deep to see what the man did. You'll see Drake Bell disseminating harmful information to a minor. You know, that's how you'll see the reports on there. They never explicitly state. And that's part of the problem, is that's creating the illusion that these kids are buying. That's helping cover it up or push it under the rug.
Do we have exactly what his punishment was? I'd like to talk about that.
The punishment or the convictions?
The punishment.
He was sentenced to 2 years of community control and probation for each count that he was charged in, which was 2 counts. And then he was sentenced to 200 hours of community service.
So yeah, I want to talk about how that's just entirely messed up. You can touch a kid and get in less trouble than you can for like marijuana or marijuana concentrates in some states, or like drug charges that you're choosing to do yourself as a grown adult. But you can go hurt a child and get away with 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service, which I'm sure he could probably buy his way out of. I'm sure there was a payment option as opposed to actually doing the hours. So that to me is something that I would like to see changed in the legal system. I would like that to be more severe. I do believe that a lot of child predators get off rather easy and not really see very many repercussions. It really doesn't get much worse than harming a child, and that's something that's going to stick with them for life. They're never going to forget that.
What does that punishment do for the victim?
Yeah.
What is making him do 200 hours community service and pay court fees? What does she get out of that?
Just a bunch of trauma. I feel she should have gotten some monetary compensation or something. We ended up watching a little bit of her kind of giving her statements in court and everything. And there was moments where we were like, God, we think she might be a little messed up from this, traumatized. It's really obvious she's gone through something traumatic, it seems. And it's just, it's really sad, you know, to see a kid just like have their youth essentially like stolen from them, you know. And this is a guy that at that time couldn't turn on Nickelodeon for a full day without seeing his face rear up on there, you know what I mean? And like he had access to plenty of kids, and you know, if she spoke up and this happened, think how many other children there might be that didn't speak up or didn't get an opportunity to like come forth or weren't brave enough, and they just live with it.
And speaking of that, how is this punishment going to encourage other kids that have gone through this to step forward? Because they know from watching this that nothing's going to happen. They're going to get 200 hours of community service.
Again, it just goes back to the speak up as soon as possible. It could have maybe made his consequences worse. Unfortunately, he is a little bit of a celebrity, so I'm sure he had a little bit of a bankroll to back him and you get off a little easier. Is there anything else you want to say in wrapping?
I just want to emphasize your point that if something's happening to you that you're not okay with, you need to speak up so that people can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, with that, let us know down in the comments what you think. Has this changed your perception of Drake? Let us know what cases you'd like to see us dig into. Is there someone you want to see exposed? Some of a murder you want us to dig into? Anything like that? And with that, I'm Rugburn.
And I'm Pickled Landon.
And this is Tombstone Tourist.